Well, I had a request, or a couple of requests, to maybe talk a little bit about people who have influenced me, and where I've gotten, or other artists rather, that have inspired me to work the way I do, and to paint what I paint, I suppose, and how I paint. So I just thought, how about if we just talk about influences first, separate those two words. Start with influences. Well, I've always been a big admirer of people with a solid work ethic. And when you work as an artist, you work on your own. There's nobody there with a prod to push you further, to push you forward. So you kind of have to depend on your own discipline in order to keep going. You can have a long stretch of time where nothing sells and you become somewhat demotivated. Well, you got to get past it. Just keep working. Just paint. That work ethic really has come from a lot of years from outside influences as well. I've worked in the oil industry, and I've done quite a bit of construction, and there's a very direct correlation between poor work ethic and failure. That transfers to a painter's life as well. But regarding painting, I was fortunate. My grandfather was an artist in Holland. My dad was also an artist. They came to my dad and my mom came to Canada. I can't remember. Anyway, after the Second World War, and 1951 maybe. Anyway, Dad had a full-time job. He's never really, for any length of time, for any long time, made a living just from painting. He worked. He had a full-time job, and then he painted on the side. But he was always working. Once he was done at his job, which he didn't like very much, he'd come home, and he would most often spend evenings in the basement painting, Saturdays as well. Sometimes he took me painting. We would do a lot of plein air together. That was a good learning curve. He offered me limitless hints, tutelage, instruction to start with, and then tutelage as I did a little bit more. I never took it very seriously. It was just kind of a fun day out. I was a child at the time, and I think, for a space of about 3 or 4 years, he and I went out painting the odd time. He bought me, the necessary, or he would just share with me his own tools and supplies. And it was a great benefit, because every week or two a new painting would appear in the living room upstairs, and that painting, that time upstairs would be necessary for the painting to dry, because he worked in oils. And also he got to live with the painting for a while, just to take visual breaks from it, and every now and then revisit the thing as it hung on the wall. And I did too. Well, we all did. And I always enjoyed that, seeing a fresh painting come upstairs. I really enjoyed that. He was a fan of the Group of Seven. It's not how he was trained, but he really liked the Group of Seven. That influenced his own painting. We lived in Manitoba at the time, and he painted. He tried to stray a little bit from the pastoral influences of European natural depictions, and he tried to become more coarse, more impressionistic, a little more bold, and tried to increase his use of color. Kind of a tough barrier to break, I think, if you go from being, very calm and leaning more towards realism, to break out, and to become looser in your technique. I thought that was pretty neat. I liked that. Then for many years, I was in many other jobs. I never considered painting to be a serious job. Eventually, got married, and I still have a son on the prairies, and I have a son and daughter from my second wife, and I live now, and that's been, what, the kids are in their late 20s, so that's been a while. Anyway, not long after my kids were born, my wife said to me, "You are gone all the time. You're always working." And although I kind of took pride in that, I also realized it wasn't the healthiest way to be a dad or a husband. Not that I'm any good at it now. Excuse me. So she sort of urged me to try to revisit painting and see if I could possibly do some part-time painting and work less out of the home. I was given an opportunity by my sister and brother-in-law at one point to stay with them on one of the Gulf Islands on the west coast of British Columbia, and I had always enjoyed boating a lot, so this was fine with me. While living there, my wife and I liked it so much we decided to rent our own place. So we did that, and virtually where we lived there, you had everything. Anytime you went anywhere, it was an island, you'd have to go by boat. It was Piers Island, not too far from the Swartz Bay Ferry Terminal. But it was great to do that. It offered you just limitless opportunities to go and explore. Yeah, love that. Anyway, I have a lot of images, a lot of photographs, a lot of memories from doing that. Oh, let's see. And we've done a fair bit of traveling. We've lived in a lot of different addresses, different areas. Just curiosity, the wanderlust, the need to, or the urge to go look around, experience different things. Not worldwide, all within Canada. All within really the western half of Canada for the most part. Okay, so I guess that's mostly influences. Yeah, it was my upbringing. Mom and Dad were very encouraging. My wife has been very encouraging. So, subject matter. I just love nature. Always have. I loved nature long before I got into painting in any serious way. I would far rather be in nature than anywhere else. I've said to a number of people over my lifetime, if it weren't for really bad weather, I wouldn't even need a house. I'm a little older now, and I think I prefer the comforts of having a house. Okay. Inspiration. Inspiration, I'm going to say that's obviously from nature to begin with, but from other artists. I don't have a long list. I'm not a guy who will look at certain images and then become so curious about that artist's life, whether they preferred orange juice or grape juice, or whether they preferred whatever, different things about their personal life, their history, what have you. That's not my avenue of interest. I like the images. The images speak volumes about any person. I've had the opportunity to see a number of different artists, and actually to not to get to know them, but to be affiliated with them in some degrees, mostly because many of our shows coincided at the same gallery at the same time, sort of thing. Well, we'd be in shows together. Now these guys are, again, they're really west coast, mostly west coast of Canada. Robert Genn, he's passed away now, but I thought he was a fantastic architect. I loved his work. There was a very sophisticated simplicity to his work, but it seemed to me that his paintings are very thoughtfully put together. And he had a great feel for things, and his strokes were right. I've never looked at his work and and said, what was he thinking when he did this? No, I've looked at his work and thought, well, that's not my taste. But taste is subjective. We all know that. Now, here's a pair. Well, it's not a pair. One is Michael O'Toole. He was apparently quite influenced by Mike Schwab. They both work, I think, or have worked primarily in acrylics. Mike Schwab is still around. Michael O'Toole passed away a few years ago. They have similar styles. I really like that style. Tremendous economy of stroke. Excellent at drawing. That's imperative, of course, if you're going to be a landscape painter. Yeah, just a looseness again to their work. You know, vibrance. There's movement there. There's life to it. So that's those two guys. You know, there's one fellow that stands out, and I know really very little about him. I remember reading some things about him, but that's lost to me because what's important is, and there's one thing that stands out in my mind, is one particular image that he made. If I remember right, the bulk of his work, the body of his work, was more on the realistic side of things, but there was one painting, don't know the name, don't remember it. It was a vertical, probably 1824-ish, maybe a little bigger, but about that shape. And it was just looking up a snowy hillside with trees, of sort of a light-ish sky in the background. Not monochromatic, but not a lot of color in it. It was all snow looking up this hillside. So the subject matter itself, I think that people would not find so interesting. But the way he handled it was superb. It's going to be one of the images that stands out in my mind for the rest of my life. Tremendously talented guy. I think he was quite young when he painted it, maybe in his late 20s. Anyway, Ozias Leduc. I think he was from Quebec. Or in Quebec. The Group of Seven. Initially Tom Thompson, specifically. Now he preceded the Group of Seven, the Canadian Group of Seven painters, somewhat, but he just enjoyed nature. I think he did a lot of trapping, fishing, hunting, especially fishing. Excuse me. He just loved to be out in nature. And he got to painting, and he had a ton of talent, but I don't think he had a lot of instruction when he began. So he simply went out into nature and painted very raw panels, small 8 by 10-ish sizes. The entire Group of Seven eventually did quite a few of that size. Well, not exactly that size. You know, they could be 9/12, they could be 7/8, 6/8, whatever. But just to say that they were smaller panels, these things were never intended to be fantastic works of art. They were intended as studies to be used by the creator of the study, you know, literally a study, to work up into a larger canvas if they felt that a larger canvas was warranted. A lot of the smaller works are celebrated, but people often forget that they were never intended to be masterworks, and they're not. They're just studies. They're fantastic. They are of fantastic historical value. That's Tom Thompson. Okay, the rest of the Group of Seven. You know, Lauren Harris. I love it's fairly sophisticated. Well, it is very sophisticated simplicity. You know, his handling of light, superb. Quite stylized, but I like it. Yeah, you know, they pretty much all have some paintings that I just love. But I can't say I love that artist. I can only say I love that painting. That's true of any painter, landscape artist that I've seen. It's always a work that I love, and it's not always what's considered to be their most successful work. It's just one that I loved. I really, you know, particularly loved it. Now, let's go down to the United States for a moment. Now, there are a number. Oh, actually, yeah. Oh, the heck! Now his name escapes me. Oh, Richard Smith. within his own technique, and his own technique is really very specific to him. It's not realism. It's a type of impressionism. Again, I suppose it could probably be pigeonholed into a smaller, tighter thing. I think that's a dangerous thing to do, so I'm not going to go into that. But I love his work. Richard Schmidt. I don't know where he hails from. I tend to think it's well, it's in the United States, but exactly where, I'm not sure. Yeah, beautiful. Unbelievably talented guy. He did mostly small works, but so beautifully rendered. This was, I remember reading a little bit in one of his books, or in, what's the book I have sitting over there? Alla Prima. You're probably familiar with it. I know many people are familiar with his work. He talks about using, or somebody else talks about using, he's unafraid to use any tool. You know, he would use the corner of a matchbook, or a brush, or a knife, or a rag, all on the same work. But he managed it so beautifully that the inconsistency of his use of tools, or use of the same tools, did not come through as an inconsistency of technique or style in the painting. His paintings congeal so well, beautifully, just really beautifully. He was unafraid to leave large blank areas on a canvas. You know, I don't think that he would put no paint on. I think for the sake of workmanship, he might just wash in the entire thing, maybe with white, maybe with an off-white, but at least there was a coat of actual oil paint on there before he would go in and make his painting, which might only occupy a certain area of the painting, and he would fade off and become very impressionistic on the edges. Or expressionistic, you know, however you want to describe it. He just, he marched to the beat of his own drum. Anyway, very, very talented guy. Scott Christensen, landscapes. He hails from the Midwest. Midwest. I don't know if it's Utah, maybe it's Arizona. I'm not sure. But again, fantastic talent there. He does a lot of really large, impressive canvases, and I haven't seen any of them in real time, in real life. But wow, stunning! I have a book of his as well. I just stunning images. Again, fearless technique, fearless attack, fearless rendering. If you look close on a lot of his paintings, it looks like a series of accidents, but they're not. You know, they are a series of well thought out, loosely rendered blobs of paint, smeared quite accurately, value-wise, color-wise, just got it the way he wanted to, you know? He knows what he's doing. Just love his work. So that's just off the top of my head, really. Well, it's not just off the top of my head because I wrote a few things down. But those are my major influences. Now, my painting style, I don't think emulates any of them. When I began painting professionally, I think it was sort of inevitable anyway, but my style was very much like my dad's was. You could see the influence. I think that's changed quite a bit over time because my paintings now aren't really that similar to what, you know, to his own technique and the appearance of his work from years ago. So, and I don't think there's any artist, you know, I've seen a lot of images. I love how somebody handles light. I love how somebody is unafraid to put a shape in a certain tree. Every artist will interpret what they see in their own way to a different level of maturity or a different level of architectural ability, varying abilities of the understanding of how light works. So again, I'm no historical academic by any means. What stands out in my mind is not the people themselves or the lives they had. What stands out is the images that they produced. I think that covers it. Any more questions, definitely ask, and I may not have the answer. I don't know. So now I'm going to get to work on this. This is a canvas I've had around for a while. I washed it before and I began to play in it again a little bit of smudging going on here. And then I left it. And I washed it again this morning because I think I'm going to reattack this. I think there's something here I'd like to see if I can. I think there's potential to make this into a great little painting. Let's see if I can do it. I don't know. I may not completely finish my reworking it before I end up with another canvas, but for the moment, this is what we're going to do. What I see is I've drawn a fair bit of attention here. There are a lot of warm colors here. Well, it's the warm greens, right? And the tree trunks. And your tendency is to look in this area. So after drawing the eye up here, I made the mistake of having all of these trunks leaving, except for this one, the top of the painting. And that, you know, this band of trunks only takes up the top, whatever that is, 4 inches. So I think what I'm going to do is cap a few of these to help to focus in more down here. And you know, this painting, the way it sits, boy, you sure need a frame on there, because what else is going to stop the eye from running off the top of the canvas? So I think I can improve it that way. As a whole, I think that I can bring some more controlled, intense light into this rocky structure, and maybe into a bit of grass that's behind here, and maybe add a hint more variety of color to the water as well. So we'll play with that, and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to release this right away. I might take you with me as I continue with this painting. Well, I will. I just don't know if I'll take you with me for the entire trip.